Although we've had special elections throughout the country throughout this year, we haven't had a big election day since the apocalypse last November. And so now, if you haven't voted yet, please pause this video, go and do that. We will be here when you come back. But if you have already voted, let's continue. There are a lot of elections going on, both for statewide offices, also important ballot measures. And we're gonna be talking about all of them. The big one that everybody's talking about is this Virginia gubernatorial election, where you have Lieutenant Governor Ralph Northam, the Democrat, going against the former Republican National Committee Chairman, Ed Gillespie. If you had, like 3 years ago, predicted what that race would look like, with this longtime Republican insider, you would have assumed it would be a fairly boring and blasé race. But Gillespie has apparently been drinking whatever Trump was drinking during his election, because for whatever reason, that campaign has been like it's sanctuary cities and it's Confederate monuments, and Gillespie is pitching himself as effectively a Republican for the alt-right in a lot of cases. I know that the polls originally had Northam up pretty significantly. I believe Hillary Clinton won Virginia by 5 points, and now the polls are showing that it's within just a couple of points. So we don't exactly know what's going to happen.
Yeah, and I'm concerned about this one mainly as a congressional nerd, I'm concerned for redistricting reasons.
Yeah.
Because this Ed Gillespie. Is that how I say it?
Gillespie, yeah.
Yeah, he was one of the people that was the architect of Project Red Map. So they're not even hiding what they're doing. They're just redistricting so that the Republicans can't lose.
Yeah.
And so for him to be the guy, the problem with Virginia is that their legislature is controlled by Republicans. And so we would like to have a Democrat there to veto any shenanigans.
Yeah.
And if Gillespie's the guy, that veto ain't coming. So that's my biggest concern. And even though I know that there's some people that are concerned about Northam because he's very centrist and he said some things about sanctuary cities that is, we have concerns.
Yeah.
But
That's
at
true.
this point, we do have to do lesser of two evils. We do, so I'm rooting for the Democrat here because Ed Gillespie's a big problem.
Yeah, I've been reading up on him. Look, I'm not gonna lie, it's not a race that I was following very closely until like the last week or so. Like I knew in the background it's going on, but you can only hold so many things in your mind simultaneously. And I've been reading up on him, and he, since becoming lieutenant governor back in 2014, has been sort of, I guess he's been reading the political winds and he's been moving in the right direction in terms of his rhetoric and everything on abortion rights and a host of other issues for the most part. But we want someone who was strong because it was right and it's what they believe, not necessarily just because they think it's politically expedient. As you alluded to, there's the sanctuary cities issue. And so that's been coming up throughout this race. Gillespie saying that he wants to, as governor, ban sanctuary cities, which is urgent because Virginia currently has 0 sanctuaries. It doesn't have any. What are you talking about, you ass? But he wants to ban them, and so he kept bringing it up. And Northam was speaking out against this, saying that we have to have respect and also protections for various people who could theoretically be abused by the state. And then, as the attacks go on, he gets worn down, the polls starting to tighten up, and then he starts implying that he might be willing to do something about sanctuary cities. In the short term, I guess there's no harm since there aren't any, but there are inclusive cities which don't technically have the internal capacity to break state law in the way the sanctuary cities do, but they have these sort of aspirational goals. Hopefully, as governor, he wouldn't go against that. But obviously, this is exactly what the Republicans in 2017 want you to do. They want you to take a race that has consequences for redistricting and a number of other issues, and then focus on these bullshit issues. Not that it's bullshit to have the sanctuary cities, but they don't have they literally don't have them right now.
Yeah.
And he wants you to talk about Confederate monuments and all of that. And so it's gonna be interesting to see who wins, because if Gillespie wins by a couple points and it turns out that he is beating the polls with this sort of new approach, that's not good. That doesn't look good for the next year or two.
No.
For future races.
It's so frustrating to watch stuff like this because it's like the Democrats are taking the bait. Like this is a non-issue in Virginia. If we were talking about California governor, like okay, fine, then it's worth talking about. In Virginia, why is this an issue?
Yeah.
And so he's taking the bait and he's going further to the right instead of further to the left. Like
exactly.
He's appealing to the Republicans' base, not his own. And it's It's the Democratic Party for you.
And not far away, we have New Jersey, where we might at long last be seeing the backside of Chris Christie. They should word that differently. But we've been dealing with him for a long time. He is, I believe at one point was polled as the least popular governor since they had begun polling the popularity of governors. He was at like the low teens or something like that. And so now we have Democrat Phil Murphy versus Republican Kim Guadagno. And there's been, I think, consistently a double-digit lead for the Democrat in this particular case. So we'll see about that.
Sounds safer.
Yeah, hopefully the bridges will be a little bit more accessible.
And the beaches.
And the beaches as well. Man, he just doesn't like those things. Now this is a race that theoretically, and again, nobody's perfect. We could find reasons to be worried about what effect this guy might have. But here you have a fairly strong blue state. Many of the efforts that they have made to pass liberal pieces of legislation have been vetoed by Chris Christie. With Murphy in place, you might have progress on these issues. So Murphy supports legalization of marijuana, is proposing a tax hike on rich individuals and corporations inside of New Jersey. Let's see, promise to extend state level protections to undocumented immigrants, which would be a switch from Christie. And again, he is going to sign bills. He's pledged to sign bills that Chris Christie has previously vetoed. One of which, by the way, is a raise for the minimum wage to $15 per hour. Not immediately, it's a gradual thing, which isn't optimal, but it certainly will be nice for the people living in New Jersey. And that is a change you can get if Murphy does win there. And then you have a couple of ballot initiatives that are certainly worth covering. So one is in Maine. We're gonna be talking about Maine a couple of times in this hour. And that is a ballot initiative that would expand Medicaid coverage to 70,000 low-income residents in Maine. This is something that, and by the way, there's been this campaign against this ballot initiative saying that this would cost too much. The state would just can't afford to extend Medicaid to these low-income individuals. The federal government would be picking up 90% of the tab. Think about the good that can be done inside of Maine if this gets passed at almost no cost to Maine. So that's something that they want to do. And bear in mind, there has been attempted Medicaid expansion 5 times in Maine. That was vetoed every single time by the Republican governor, Paul LePage.
Did they never, after the Affordable Care Act, Maine never did the Medicaid expansion? So this would be their first time?
This is a particular aspect of Medicaid expansion, but this aspect has been shot down multiple times. Okay. I'm not sure how much the general campaign got, but this is one that the Republicans in that state have been dead set against. And 5 vetoes, that's a lot of effort to stop people who can't afford their health insurance from getting it. And so again, hopefully people are voting. It's difficult to say. Polls won't close, I think, until the end of this hour, so we won't know. Even if it was immediately apparent, we won't know until after this hour. But I have read a couple of reports that anecdotal evidence is that in certain neighborhoods there appears to be less voting than there was the last time around in Virginia. That's probably not, when you're talking about a difference of about 3% in the polls, a change in turnout is pretty significant. But I know that a lot of people are watching this. A lot of people are gonna try to say a lot about where the country is at and where it's going based on these results. I don't know how accurate that ever is, but this is a significant voting day after a lot of smaller special elections. And so hopefully I'll have some good news tomorrow.
Help us build independent media. Become a member of the Young Turks. TYTnetwork.com/join.